What is up, guys? I have a fun video for you today. Today's video is another GWENT tips and discussion. Today's topic is one that I've been looking forward to for a very long time, and it is binary cards. Now, if you're unfamiliar with what that is, binary cards refers to cards that if they stick and get their value, they've practically won you the game, and if they get answered, you're looking at a loss or looking to be in a very bad spot. That's what it means by binary. It's either a win or a loss type of deal. Now, again, it's not strictly that, and some of the cards we're going to talk about don't fully follow that, but I'm using this as the broad term for, I think, some problematic things in GWENT. And the first thing to discuss, and one that's not going to be a surprise, are scenarios. Now, when they came out in Merchants of Ophir, in terms of faction identity, flavor, and the idea of it, I absolutely love it. Really great in that regard. Have no issue with it. Now, what I do have an issue with is the power level of it, especially when they were released. They were all at 13 provisions, which was equivalent to Yorvis Gambit. But the ceiling of these cards is so much more above something like Yorvis Gambit that it's ridiculous that they were considered the same provision level. I do not understand that. And I also don't understand why it took so long for them to get nerfed to where they are at now. Except Gedioneth. Gedioneth didn't get that, but it's because it lost the second one thing. Now, the biggest offender of this, though, is Masquerade Ball. And as you can see, I've not crafted this card, I never will, and I never will play it. I hate this card with a passion. And we're going to kind of talk about why. And this is case in point of the binary cards. So, this card used to be 13 provisions, and you can play it twice. That's ridiculous. That is so insanely ridiculous if you ask me. And the issue is, now that you can only play it once, and it's 15 provisions, it's still almost an auto-clued in Nilfgaard. That's insane. 15 provision card that you can play once, and it's pretty much an auto-include. I think its power level is too high. And so, 15 provisions, but it easily plays for over 20, right? So, you get Thirsty Dame and 2 Fangs, so that's 12 points, and then you get 2 procs onto the Dame from those poisons, so that gets you to your 15. But then when you're taking out a target, you're at least probably getting a 5. So that's putting you at 20, but you're honestly probably taking above that. And that's not taking into consideration cards you're playing, such as Joachim, which gets you still even way more points than you can imagine. And I hate that. Like, you can be doing so well in a match, and then they drop ball, and it wins it for them, right? And they just have to play a couple aristocrats, boom, they've won. You know, not a whole lot of thought involved. But, on the other hand, if you answer it with a heat wave, they can be left dead in the water, right? So they paid 15 provisions for this card, kind of the big powerhouse, and you answer with a heat wave, you can stomp them into the ground sometimes. And so that's just super binary, right? If Masquerade Ball lives, they're looking at an easy win. If it gets answered, well, they're really going to have to fight for it. And if you have a solidly built deck, you're in a good spot to win, you know? There's so much more that can be said about it, but the ceilings of these are just so high. Like, they're all binary. Like, all of them just give you the deck so many points. But if they get answered, a lot of provisions wasted. And, the deck is really hurtful. Like, Siege is a great example. If Siege gets answered and you're playing you're playing a lot of Siege engines, well, you're really hurting because you're relying on that bombardment and getting extra Siege engines out for kind of board wipe is kind of the idea with that. It's crazy. The next card we're going to talk about is this one. Oh yes, back in the Shield Wall days, right? Now this one is crazy because it's only at 8 provisions. Like, everyone tries to super greed this card, and if you can get away with it, it works, and play it like, you know, long round 3, it's your second card play after Defender. And it just wins you the game. I mean, it's over at that point if it can't get answered. But at 8 provisions, even if you played as like your 5th card, it's still getting like 10 charges. More, depending if, you know, they're using Oniromancy to bring out stuff. Or, you know, spawning a bunch of things. Like, you know, cycling through a whole bunch of cards as you can kind of do with that. And, you know, it's balanced, I think, somewhat fairly, right? Like, it's 3 provision, it's 3 power, so it can be killed by a lot of things. It's Rolock, so it can be moved off. You know, like, there's some balance in there to get it, but at 8 provisions, I mean, you can just slap this into decks. And, hey, throw it down. If it sticks, well, you're winning, you know. There are things that can counter, and if you don't play it super smart, you know, Yurden can absolutely wreck this, but, man, this card in the long run, I mean, that's just an auto win. But if it gets answered, a lot of times Northern Realms decks, currently with their builds now, if you aren't going like the Witchers with Uprising, they're going to be hurting. They're going to have to really counter some of your stuff or hope some other engines stick. So, Scenarios and Visigoda are just really huge examples of just true binary, right? They live, boom, it's over, you've lost. Like, you see that card drop, and you know that you don't have a good counter for it. It's hard playing throughout the rest of that. Unless you had something that's super greedy and can just absolutely outpoint them, you're done for, and it's really rough to see that. You have a close game with Nilfgaard. We're going back and forth. You think you're going to pull it out. They drop ball, and you realize that you have kind of a big unit. Oh, well, it's game over. So, the next ones we're going to talk about are a little bit similar, but I think Visigoda and Ball and Scenarios in general are kind of the biggest offenders of that. But, like, Iced right now. If you can't bleed that out and you go into like a long round with it, and Skellige just gets to do its normal warrior madness, and then they drop this play on top, I mean, it's crazy. You could, if that gets, so he has 5, so then you could do 15 if you discarded a great sword, and then you've got 27 if you with Yutta coming out. So you get 27 points on your side, and then you're also dealing 12 damage, you know, if there's a unit that high. So, you know, that puts you at 40, it puts you at 39 if you get max value out of that. It's almost 40 points off of a single card. Now, there is some setup for it. That's fine. You know, I wouldn't say this is big an issue, but that's insane, though, that someone could pull that off in one turn. And, you know, I mentioned Second Wind earlier. They took away Second Wind because you could proc full Gettyneth in one turn. And, like Pincer Maneuver from Northern Realms, CD Projekt Red, they didn't want that much tempo and power in one turn, so they kind of turned away from all that. But then Iced is a card. And even if you don't get the Bloodthirst 2, I mean, it's still playing 17 points on like an empty board, but going up into the 20s. And it's 11 provisions. And a lot of people bring up, it's like, okay, their setup, like, you have to have a little bit of a deck building cost, but it's like, you really don't. You really don't. Especially with Blaze of Glory having a lot of provisions, like, you really don't. Anyways, next card is, she's somewhere, there she is, Sayana. Now, this is a meme card, right? This isn't a serious meta discussion. But you look at this card, you're paying 12 provisions for it, and there are some deploy abilities that can be really stupid strong and can pretty much guarantee you a win. But she's very counterable because it's an order ability, it can be locked, she's only 3 strength, so it can be killed fairly easily. So you think you paid 12 provisions, but this gets answered, oh man, your combo that you're trying to set up, it's done. You paid a lot of provisions for it. But if it goes off, your opponent's probably really scared. Because you can have some great setups. Like, it was Fuchsia Briefs ran this with Wild Boar of the Sea. Yeah. Like, with some setup, that could be really strong. But if Sayana gets answered, you know, Wild Boar can still get you good value, but it's nowhere near the level. So I think that's kind of another binary card. With it sticks, like, you're looking at a pretty good win. But if it doesn't, and like I said, I mean, they try to put some balance in with the provisions and stuff, but it just creates the issue. You're paying so much for what can get answered so easily. But, you know, you feel bad for your opponent if they just don't have the answer. Siri Dash is another one. Let's see if we can find her. This goes off, you can get massive card abuse. That's crazy. Your opponent's going to have the answer, they aren't. And yeah, because people are like, oh, it takes 4 turns to go, that's fine. And it's same with like Meave, right? With these turn things, it's like it's either going to get answered instantly or it's not. It's very rare that they're going to have enough continual damage to put it out, and you're going to be lacking things to keep protecting it. The 4 turns isn't the balancing. Like, it's gonna go off or it isn't, and it's binary to me in that regard. Like, you're either able to protect or you aren't, and then you can get 2 card advantage on it. Where are you? There it is. This card. So having a card like this is fair because it keeps some things in check. You kind of always have to respect that they might have a Yurden. And in some decks this card falls completely flat. And I think that's kind of the binary thing what I'm going at, is this card can completely win you a game. Or, you know, if it's like SK Warriors or whatever, right? It's getting you very little value. And it's just kind of binary, right? Like, this could single-handedly win it, or, you know, you get no value out of it and you paid a lot of provisions for it. And this card just sucks because it's like, when you have that one person who just massive greeds and, you know, you tank them with this, like, it feels nice, and, you know, if it happens to you, you set up for that. But it really sucks when you weren't playing that greedy and you just have boost, but your opponent's playing super greedy and then they just throw in a Yurden and it wins it for them. But that's kind of a discussion for another day. But yeah, I think that card kind of fits into it. So, to summarize, Gwent shouldn't have these cards that their ceiling is utterly high or the floor is just completely terrible. Like, having too many super swingy things I just don't think is a good idea. And actual fixes for that are going to vary. But I do think buffing up bronzes and stuff and making sure your hand always feels good to play is good. And then just lowering the point output of some of these cards. Like, if scenarios weren't in Gwent, like I said, I really like the idea and stuff, but it just kind of might be better, or just Masquerade Ball in general. I think having cards that can be a little like high, like, you know, you go for it, like we're going to go kind of greedy here, like Dagger, you know, I think something like that's kind of fine. Where you have a few of those cards in each faction where it can be a little swingy, and, you know, sometimes your opponent doesn't have an answer, that's fine. But I think I gave enough lists of it continually showing up that I think there's just a little too much of it, and I just don't think it's really good for Gwent when you go into a matchup and it's just, if I can't instantly answer this, like, it's over. Like, that feels bad. That one card really dictated it. I think it should be a coherent strategy built upon synergies, archetypes, sequencing, and those still are there. Don't get me wrong, like, I recognize that, but at the same time, Nilfgaard can kind of do whatever it wants. Oh, we slapped down ball, we played Joachim, we cooed onto Joachim, boom, we win. That's not fun. To me, that's not super good. I don't really want to say game design here, but I just don't think that's really a smart, you know, choice overall, to have something that's just as basic as that and can still shell out 20 points and flip the game. I honestly just need to create a catalog, but there's been so many games where Nilfgaard, they get 20, 30, 40 points just based off a ball, just playing it and proccing the whole things, and that's crazy. So, I hope you guys enjoyed the discussion. Sorry it probably wasn't super coherent. There's a lot of stuff that I was trying to go through in a short round, but short amount of time, short round. I hope I showed you some cards I think are a problem with this. I hope I kind of explained and maybe just gave a couple solutions with how to fix it. But yeah, the top end cards of Gwent need to be looked at a bit, need to be reevaluated, or just need some overhaul, and some of the more mid-range or lower ones need to be brought up, and maybe some slight overhauls to Gwent in terms of like how rounds are won. I would really like so much more player agency where cards aren't winning you the game and your sequencing and thought is. And certainly that is in the game now, but probably not as much as it could be. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed, and I will catch you in the next one.